GM friends, and welcome to the Metacast brought to you by Naavik. My name is Nico, and today I'm joined by Renz, Chong, the co-founder and CEO of BreederDAO. The last episode I was recording live from Brighton in the UK, and today we're in Paris. It's actually doable today. So yesterday was the hottest day in France ever.
There was a heat wave.
It was terrible, and so we were in this room trying to do like panel discussions for YGG, and it was like a sauna, and but it was okay. Look, today's fine. We're fresh. We're ready to go. So the idea today would be to talk about BreederDAO, what BreederDAO is doing, where BreederDAO is going, and a bit around assets within the metaverse and that kind of stuff. So Renz, when I saw that you guys announced a raise the start of this year, BreederDAO was described as the factory of the metaverse.
Yep.
Could you elaborate a bit on that, and what is BreederDAO doing, and what's your business model, etc.?
Sure. So maybe I'll go back to how we actually started to give things perspective. So we really started just by breeding Axie Infinity. So you know how the actual economy within Axie is composed of players and breeders, right? The flywheel works such that people who actually play get SLP. SLP is then used to breed. And once you breed more Axies, then you can onboard more people, right? So at one point, like June 2021, and because we were situated in the Philippines, we saw the entire landscape, right? A lot of people left and right were asking for scholarships, were asking for guild managers, right? And they all wanted to join. And because we're quite close with the YGG ecosystem, my mentor was also the one who introduced me to like this entire space. Is also a close advisor to YGG, so we're pretty close to the space. So we were thinking that maybe everybody is too focused on the demand side of things, on player liquidity, grinding for SLP, and building more Axies to accommodate more scholars. We thought that maybe there's an opportunity on the supply side, and when we look at the marketplace, the Axie prices went from $200 to $800, and so we thought that maybe there's an opportunity to capture there. So I pitched it to the same mentor. My mentor then gave $180K. In less than 3 months, we were able to generate $6 million in revenues and close to 1.5 million in terms of profits. So we thought that, just like any bull market in crypto, we were able to ride the wave, and it was like luck, right? More than anything. So we stopped, and then we kind of thought about it more, right? But the thing changed when we got in contact with Gabby, because Gabby was like, the actual problem is the lack of quality asset in the market, right? Because there's a lot of scholars looking to play Axie Infinity. There's a lot of people looking to play because they can earn, right? So he was like, that's a single problem in the space, which is why people cannot expand, because funding was never an issue, because there were a lot of like VCs, at least during that time, there were a lot of VCs who were constantly giving out money to all of these like guilds, right? Mm-hmm. Left and right, guilds were popping, right? So it wasn't an issue at all. And then there's no problem with player base, because just in the Philippines, you have so many people who lost their jobs during the pandemic and are looking to find alternative sources of income. And Axie Infinity at one point provided a higher minimum wage than the minimum wage in the Philippines, even in Manila. So overall, the real bottleneck was the supply side. So we thought about it more. We asked more guilds, more games, and it was shared sentiment across everyone. So we were like, okay, I think we can specialize in producing assets within games just by leveraging off like in-game mechanics, right? But we thought about it more, and what we realized is that we don't want to just create assets that are allowed for by the games, right? Eventually, as the factory, we also want to expand to be able to create our own assets. What does that mean? Right now, when it comes to games, you have breeding, you have crafting, you have cloning, right? And in the future, there may be other modes of like asset generation, but we want to introduce the idea of community creation within these games. So we want to maybe create a platform that would allow people to have their own or design their own assets, and then put that within the games, kind of like cosmetics or skins that exist right now, right? So that's one of the visions that we have. It could be, wearables for your digital avatars, or like furnitures for your homes. The scale is going to be really huge, and there's no limit to whatever it is that we want to produce. As long as you're in a metaverse and you want to create an asset for it, then we should be able to cover for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So It was a lot to cover, so let's take this step by step. You started initially last summer when the Axie boom happened, and you saw, if I understand this correctly, you saw an arbitrage opportunity between the price of SLP, which was needed to breed new Axies, and the price of new Axies, and the way they were, or the price at which they were sold in the marketplace.
Pretty much. So it's more of like the cost to produce an Axie was so much lower than the cost that's being sold in the market.
Okay. And so you decided, hey, why don't we just, and you productized it, you made it so super hyper efficient, and you basically, you botted it almost. Would that be a fair characterization?
And so we kind of specialize in optimizing for specific traits that we know are going to dominate in a match, right? So when Axie changed the meta not the meta, but the mechanics such that only people who participate or who win in the PvP actually get SLP, then that allowed for more people, or that enabled more people to kind of think and design and craft like Axies that are far superior than others. Because previously when, you can get easily 150 SLP from Adventure, right? Then it doesn't matter what your Axie look like or what trait it has, right? Even the worst Axies can actually achieve 150 SLP as long as you spend enough time.
Yes.
And when they actually removed that part, then it became more strategic in a sense, right? You have to conserve your energy because that's the only way you'll get SLP. And if you don't reach the quota, then, oftentimes you get kicked out of the guild, right? So it became more strategic and more competitive in terms of landscape. And we kind of optimized for specific traits that would allow you to win in a match.
Okay. We, with Naavik, did a very deep breakdown of the Axie Infinity economy. And we saw indeed that some of the shifts that were happening also on the economic side was that skill was more rewarded than just purely time. And then, you saw the opportunity there, or the demand at least there, for the best assets.
Right.
So fun little story, I heard about Axie Infinity pretty early on. And when the boom happened, I was like, I got to try this, right? So I paid a shit ton of money for 3 Axies. And they were absolutely terrible. I couldn't win a match. So I should have probably, used your.
You should have.
Yeah, you should have. I should have.
We should have met earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, that's cool. And so what you do is you analyze the meta. You see what's the team composition or the certain traits that have the highest percentage of winning. Do you do that like based on analytics? Is there like an analytics platform?
So we actually get our data from 2 sources. The first one is by actually playing the game. Mm-hmm. So within BreederDAO, we actually have like game analysts who's tasked to just play the game, understand like the meta, and then tell us like what sorts of builds actually work for like which ranking. So because there's different MMR rankings, and for each range, there's a specific kind of Axies depending on what these guys are actually using. The second one is through data analytics. So we track the marketplace, see what's actually being bred, see also like what's being sold, right? So we also track liquidity in a sense. Like you want to find like a niche where people are, where there's a constant volume of assets or particular assets and traits that are being sold. And that's what we kind of optimize for, at least in the back end.
Yeah. Okay. And we actually, on this podcast a few months ago, we had a discussion about the future of guilds and specifically targeted at becoming an esports organization.
Right.
And, we were talking about a hypothetical world where you had certain in-game items that, every time you generated them, they had like a random characteristics, which was maybe normally distributed on it could be go very bad or very good.
Okay.
And so I guess, the way you would see yourself in such a environment would be to like, generate a ton of these assets and then like try to optimize to have the long tail of the good characteristics.
Yep. Well, I guess like, even though it's actually normalized, there's still a way for you to boost like certain occurrence of like specific characteristics, right? At least that's part of like the game. Right?
Should be part of the game. So
we try and maximize that probability, and because of the rate at which we can produce assets, because we also build technology that allows for us to produce these assets at scale, then chances are we'll have like the largest pool of like best assets, just because we optimize for it via the highest probability, as well as like we produce the most assets, right? So by nature, like we should be able to get like the most.
Okay. And then you're saying that, okay, on the long term, you see yourself more on the user generated content side where you help players to give them the tools to actually create things and add value within the games that you're focusing on?
Yep. So I feel like what's lacking in a lot of these games right now is the attachment that players usually have with their assets, right? So the guild model, although it's quite revolutionary, right? It has one flaw. The assets are not owned by the players, and they're actually using it as a means to generate income. So in that sense, they're already detached from their assets, and the objective is not to collect these assets, but instead to utilize them to earn a living for themselves. I'm not saying that's bad, right? Because I admit that there are always people who are going to play these games to earn. And that has always existed even before blockchain gaming. Genshin Impact, for example, is a game that I always use as a reference because when I was starting Genshin Impact, people were already selling me accounts because at the start you earn like a certain pool of like gems, and then you're able to use those gems to actually reroll characters. And it's RNG based, right? So as long as you create like tons of account, try to work on the RNG, then you might luck out on getting like a good character. And if you luck out on that, and it so happened that, this new guy who wants to enter, who has money, wants to actually get a character, then instead of him like trying to recreate these accounts, he can just buy it straight from you. So yeah, I mean, there will always be people who would play to earn. And I guess that isn't bad. That is actually like, a specific profile or demographic of players within the ecosystem. And it's hard for us to rule them out because it's not up to us to actually rule them out. Players should play depending on how they actually want to play it, right? And it's not like, we should bar these guys from playing just because they extract value from the economy, right? Instead, we should design these games to target like different individuals or different profiles and allow them to enjoy the game based on how they want to enjoy it.
Do you think that your participation, so what you're doing is you're optimizing, you're essentially like arbitraging inefficiencies within the game. And so you're making it harder for someone who is not optimizing to actually win, I would say, right? If you're an average player, you buy some average axes, because BreederDAO is optimizing so much and providing like top meta liquidity of assets.
Yep.
It's like the average team will be stronger, which makes it harder for an average person who's not in touch with the meta to actually win. So do you think that a game would be more fun without a participant like BreederDAO?
I think it varies because even though we say we're the largest player, right? Because of how, breeding works and that everyone can actually breed, right? We only really produce like, at our peak, we only really produce like 3 to 5% of the total market supply. So it's still decentralized enough that people actually participate and are able to produce their own. And even if we say that we don't participate, people are still going to produce like assets better than someone else, right? So it's part of the game to actually study it and to try and formulate things. It's part of what makes it fun, right? But I feel like, it's also unfair because right now, or during that time, there was only one game.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all competing in the same battlefield. Mm-hmm. But eventually, the more games that are, in the market, then the more optimization can happen, the more people are, the more opportunities for people to be able to participate, right? So it's just that when we started, it was only one game and people all flocked to that game.
Mm-hmm.
So we became dominant in that game. But I think like the game still provided a ton of opportunity for a lot of people just because of how breeding works. It doesn't like, so there's no like limit to the number of people who can breed, right? It's not like, if you have a badge, then those are the only people who can actually breed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because there's no limiting to there's no limit to the number of people who can actually breed and participate, then, I don't think like, a market without BreederDAO is more efficient because ultimately, like if not BreederDAO, then someone else would actually rise to the challenge and be, the number one there.
You remind me of these hedge funds or like large financial institutions who do arbitraging of like different currencies across markets. And, when you ask them like, what are you doing? Because I think, often regular people actually suffer from their arbitraging. And then their answer is, but if we don't do it, someone else will.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's your answer. Okay. Noted. Good.
I mean, but it's not just that. I think, because there's actually an opportunity there. Then, I mean, we're not actually stopping you from doing the same thing, right? You can do it yourself. So
yes,
so it's not that someone is going to do it, but it's an open market.
But because, so, I mean, I would say that because there's now a financial incentive to have almost like to have a PhD in like, you know, in the game itself, if that makes sense.
Right.
You actually, like, as a company, right, or as a DAO, and we can go into the DAO aspect later, you know, are so strongly financially incentivized to optimize everything so much that the game becomes less fun for those who are not optimizing that. Like, and so I guess my conclusion is, because I think I agree with you, like, you personally, if you wouldn't be doing what you do, someone else would do it. And so I think this is purely a consequence of the dynamics that putting assets on chain and having a kind of, you know, randomly generated assets that actually influence like utility within the game.
Yep.
It's just like a natural consequence of that. And just because, you know, we as humans are, you know, greedy as fuck, you know, we're just going to try and use it to our advantage to make as much money as possible.
You know, I feel like because it's also an economy, right? People tend to have like different roles within the economy. We kind of specialize in providing OTC deals to guilds. And if we don't actually do it for them, then they're just going to breed it on their own. We've encountered some guilds who don't even know like what it is they're doing. And so, you know, one of the guilds that we've worked with actually relies on their scholars to tell them like which assets they should make. And so instead of doing that, we approached them and told them that, you know, we can actually do it for you. So in that sense, we're not actually competing against like this marketplace or the market or the volume in the marketplace, because we're actually creating a different volume, or we're touching on a different volume. And in that sense, you know, if we don't do it, then they'll do it themselves. They might arrive at the same, you know, assets, only like longer or like more expensive. But ultimately, if they actually go with us, then it's actually a shortcut. So it's more efficient in that sense.
That makes sense. And so what percentage of the assets that you create do you sell OTC? And OTC means over the counter directly, like you make a deal with like a guild. The guild would be like, okay, we have 1,000 scholars, so we need 3,000 top tier axes. So can we buy them for, you know, X amount of dollars? What's the percentages there?
You want it specific to Axie, because we produced like for 6 different games, and for the most part, like for the other 5 games, we did it like marketplace. So if it's a total, then the ratio would be 30 to 70, 30 for the guilds, and then 70 to marketplace. But if we're looking at purely Axie Infinity, then I think in terms of like value, that's going to be like 70-30.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned 6 other games. Which are those?
Well, 5 other games, so 6 games in total.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So Axie, Pegasus, Carbada, Fancy Birds, Cybele, as well as Crypto Unicorns.
Okay, gotcha. And so all of these games, if I'm not mistaken, have a kind of breeding type dynamic, and or they might be called different, right? But it's the same thing.
Well, Cybele, it's mentoring, but it's still the same, mostly breeding. Yeah.
And so, you know, if you break down breeding, like, how do you look at it from like across games? Like, is it always the same thing where you like need one or multiple assets, and then you get like like a randomization function is called upon which traits that you inherit?
I mean, currently with the games released on blockchain, like most of them are the same. It's also natural for it to happen that way because Axie Infinity was kind of the standard, right? And everybody pretty much copied the same model, especially after their success. But in the future, of course, we're going to see like a lot more iterations, especially now as people are seeing like the flaws with what's happening, right? And we can only improve from here, right? So we're quite certain that there will be more improvements and variations in the future. And we will not be solely locked in towards like a singular type of breeding where you just have 2 assets, you combine it, or you can have like 1 asset and combine it, and then you get like an egg or a baby, right? And you wait for it to hatch, and then you repeat the same cycle over and over again.
If you look at the 6 games that you're operating in, what differentiates each game from another in terms of, I guess the dynamics, as you just said, are the same or broadly the same between the games, but what decides how much effort you put in it? How many assets that you really breed and how much revenue you get?
I think what differentiates them would be the gameplays. Axie Infinity and Carbada are similar in terms of gameplay. It's like a 3v3, right? And then card battler. But Pegasus is like an RNG. You have Fancy Birds, which is a hyper casual game similar to Flappy Birds, right? And then you have Crypto Games, which is for Crypto Unicorns, which is like a farming game. So because of the genre of these games, then there are different stats that you have to optimize for. And depending on the nature of the game, say, if it's Axie Infinity, then it needs to be the combination of these three assets, right? You want to optimize, or you want to make sure that the combination of traits across the three assets are perfect, because it's a co-op, at least between the three, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have Pegasus, where it's an individual horse fighting against like all the other horse, and it's a bit, speculative in terms of like how the stats affect these, or how the stats affect like the winnability or the win rate of like these horses. So I feel like in terms of optimization, that's where it matters, especially on our end, because we're optimizing for specific or different things. If Axie Infinity, we have to optimize for specific cards. In Pegasus, we have to optimize for a specific breed type or like a specific genotype, right? So I think that's where they differ, at least right now. But essentially, if you try and look at it, you're optimizing for something, and that something kind of predicts like the winnability of an asset.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so what do you think went wrong with all of these games, or most of these games, right? Axie, SLP went down, the prices of Axie went down. I think many of the other games have a similar type of trajectory. So, in your words, or in your view, what went wrong?
I think it's not what went wrong, but what we've actually learned from this. Because Axie Infinity kind of started by introducing, the ability to earn within games. And it actually opened our eyes to see like what sorts of value blockchain actually provides, especially when it comes to gaming. Because income before was possible, right? You have black markets you have black market operations selling, a bunch of stuff like within games, but not actually allowed by these games, right? And then all of a sudden, you have Axie Infinity, where you can own your asset and you can actually, and as a consequence of that, you can actually sell these assets. And because you can sell these assets, then you can earn from these assets, right? So it opened our eyes to one of the key utility of blockchain, which is because of ownership, then you can participate in a decentralized marketplace, hence allowing you to earn. And I think like I wouldn't say that's like the only step that we would have taken to be able to open the eyes of like a lot of people to, gaming or like to blockchain gaming. But I think it was a necessary step for us to be able to progress, right, towards the next step. So now that we know that this kind of model doesn't work, and, to some extent, people call it like a Ponzi-ish scheme, because at one point you wouldn't be able to catch on to the demand, or rather the supply that's being generated by just encouraging or onboarding more people, right? So I think because it's flat right now, and, people talk about like sinks or burns, right? Mm-hmm. And people are saying that, we need to add more burns or sinks to be able to make the economy more sustainable. But I guess my question is, like, do we really need to make the economy sustainable, or do we need to make like the game like better in terms of everything, right? Is it the economy that we have to optimize for, or is it the game itself? Because people seem to think that, these are two separate things. But game economies have always existed, right? And people didn't necessarily optimize for these economies. Yes, they tried to make it better so that, the experience is, I guess, more real. And, in a sense, you can also gamify economies, right? But if you try to optimize for economies such that, everyone can actually earn, then I don't think that's ever going to be sustainable, or that's even realistic, right? Because if you look at the earlier models, it's just new money being passed on to old players. And the moment that new money stops coming in, then you have no choice but to actually let the people who are still in the game suffer. So yeah, I mean, that's my general perspective on what's happening and what happened for a lot of these games.
Okay, so just try to summarize, right? You saw that through blockchain, there is a possibility to, I guess, drive back value towards the players instead of all of that staying within the game. But your general thought is that you don't see the play to earn concept work, at least not on a broad scale within a game. Like, we shouldn't have the expectation that, or at least for now maybe, that people, would have a job playing these games.
Yeah.
And I guess then your argument would be, and this is, just me saying that for you, so feel free to correct me, that the people who earn should perhaps be the ones that are the most skilled at the game. Would that be a good idea?
Well, in general, like anyone who actually contributes, right? Which is why some people think that, there shouldn't be like any secondary token where you can just farm it consistently. Instead, value should be created from the governance token if you actually contribute or participate towards the betterment of the game. Or it should be actually catered towards, the NFTs themselves. And then asset may appreciate or depreciate depending on whether or not, it actually provides a good meta within the game. So yeah, I mean, I think, yes, in a sense, like it should be given towards the most skilled players, but only if those skilled players actually contribute to the game.
Okay.
We can't have like everyone like earning, right? Or winning in terms of like, on the financial aspect.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's what I think a lot of people have been saying, right? Okay, so it's we go away from play and earn, but it's contribute and earn. That's what you're saying.
Yes, although again, as I've said, like play and earn isn't necessarily like a thing that I would push myself. People can play and earn, people can play to earn, people can play to own or play and own, right? It's not up to us to actually decide or to design for that specific profile of users. We shouldn't build like games for these specific people, these specific like individuals, right? Because there are actually 3 billion players. Axie Infinity was able to get like 3 million at its peak. And, that's only a small subsection, right? So we know that maybe play to earn can target 3 million people. There are different other profiles that we need to target in order to capture that entire 3 billion people.
Okay, that's fair. What is what are your thoughts on the concept of breeding? So you said, from what we've seen from Axie, right, the token price and the NFT price collapsed. We need to learn from that.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a similar model that would work sustainably? And for example, like if you could change a thing within the Axie gameplay or economy, what would you change to make it sustainable, or have you given up?
I haven't given up for sure, right? And it's hard to actually say like what would work versus what wouldn't work. But I try to kind of change some small variables, kind of like, when you're doing like a scientific experiment, right? You have like a base model and you try to change like a few variables here and there to see how the population or how, it will interact with each other. So, maybe things like you're actually having, or you're actually parts like breaking, and then you would need to have a sink, say SLP, burn to be able to repair it. Again, I don't know. I wouldn't claim to be an expert in terms of game design or game economies, but yeah, these small changes actually may affect like a lot of people, and you won't really know like what would succeed unless you actually try it out and it succeeds.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter that if it succeeds for one game, then it will surely affect or it would surely be like a model that's replicable across like every single game. So I don't know like how it will work, but in terms of sustainability, it's really going to be hard to predict or to say like what would actually work versus what wouldn't.
Okay. So you're saying that if you build a game, the only way to know if it's truly sustainable is to actually test it out.
Yes, exactly.
And it's very hard to model out sustainability.
Yep.
Okay.
And then it really depends on like the kind of people that you're able to attract, right? If naturally, you design a game such that it's easy for people to earn money from it, then you can expect that, the pool of individuals that you're going to be able to trap or to attract would be, those who are just looking to earn from it. So if you design a game that targets like different profiles, then I guess it will be easier for you to kind of think about like, should I design an economy for like a specific individual, or like, should it be like for a broader audience? And then I'd see like the demographics that I'm able to like attract based on, the kind of game that I actually design.
Okay. Do you think we'll ever have these types of games, reach mass audience, like 100 million plus players?
Could be, because I think like, designing a blockchain game isn't really super different from like, of course you have like smart contracts and the intricacies of like, NFTs. But I think at the core of it, like it still provides entertainment, right? And we've seen like a ton of genre of games, from pay to win, and free to play, right? And these genres didn't really differ that much. I mean, you have free to play, hyper casual, right? And then, we're seeing the same set of games that are being developed right now within the blockchain gaming space, and even the AAA games, right, are being developed in the space. So if we were able to do it in the past, and blockchain ultimately just allows for people to be able to own their asset, then I believe that there's no reason for us to not achieve the same success as we have, like for free to play.
Yeah. Okay. Worst case scenario, the breeding cycle turns out to never result in like a sustainable economy, just because it is, abused by players like yourself, right?
Yep.
And optimized so much that the games that are resulting from it are actually never fun to play, right? In the end, you need, in order for people to take money out, I guess, you need to have players that bring money in. And that's usually, I know it's often also whales, but on the other hand, there's also this long tail of newer players that are not super skilled, that are just enjoying the game. And if they feel that because, the system is gamed so much that they just have a disadvantage at every turn, it might just never gain traction. Long intro to ask, what does BreederDAO do?
That's very interesting, because people seem to think that what we do is actually quite linear, and that we only just rely on like the breeding within games. But
it's in the name, man.
Yes,
you picked that.
Yes, although it's actually we just made it so that it pays tribute to the game that started it all, which is Axie Infinity. But we actually specialize in asset generation, so that includes crafting, for example. And we've seen how crafting has always been something that games have, right, within games. Not as linear as breeding, where you just combine assets, right? But you collect like certain recipes, you try to upgrade it, right? And then there's chances that you break an asset. And sometimes, the price to actually make an asset, factoring like all the wastage and all the breakage, right, would actually be more expensive than just buying it from a merchant who knows how to optimize these things. And that, I feel like, is going to be our positioning in terms of the market. But aside from that, as I've said earlier, like, we don't just want to work within like game mechanics, right? We also want to introduce like UGC, as you said, a platform for users to be able to create and personalize their own assets and put it in their game, right? So it's touching on interoperability, but it touches more on the creativity of the people and of the community.
Okay. So what you're saying in the first part was that, you're essentially focused on, asset generation within NFT-based games, and that currently is mainly done through breeding. But there will be games where you have to combine a bunch of assets, which could be NFTs and or ERC20 tokens, just fungible tokens, and combine them into other resources. And you're going to do it in such an optimized way that you can basically provide it at the cheapest price for players. Yes. Yep. Okay. Okay. And then, over time, I guess, then you're also saying like whenever there's a UGC component there, then you will also try, I guess, to optimize the utility from that UGC component, or give people the tools to make the best assets they can.
Yep. Well, not the best assets in terms of like, like game domination, right?
Yes.
But best assets in terms of like how they look, how they want their characters to look like.
Okay. What are some of the games that you're interested in, or that seem to be going in the two second directions, where it's more like a crafting thing or a UGC generation thing?
So in terms of crafting, there's Guild of Guardians, right? At least like in the near term. Ember Sword seems to also have like a crafting. UGC, you have Shrapnel in terms of like their land, being able to like, create your own like maps. But I haven't really seen like any UGC for avatars, at least not yet. So it's mostly common within the metaverse. The Decentraland allows you to create your own designs and upload it, right? And even sell it, right? So yeah, we want to bring that component to games as well, because we believe that people also value how they look within games. You have people playing, League of Legends, Fortnite, Mobile Legends, and they value their skin, even though it doesn't add like any thing to their stats. It's really more of like, some bragging, right? Or like, for show. And, sometimes that's all what people need to be able to enjoy the game. And people are doing it now. So why not also do it on blockchain?
Yeah, that's true. Before I want to touch upon the DAO part piece of what you're doing as well. But before that, there's one interesting question that I've been asking people, and I've always I have my opinion of this, as I usually do in these questions. And so my question for you is, if you look at the big MMOs that already exist, that are very popular, I've noticed that pretty much like 50% of the people I meet within Web3 like played World of Warcraft or RuneScape, or both. So my question to you is, do you feel like these games would have been as successful as they were if they had been like fully on chain, where the economies would have been open? Well, so the game doesn't live on chain, but all the assets would be NFTs or fungible tokens.
That's a very interesting question. People also say that these were the original blockchain games, right? I think it might be, in the sense that, because that's how the game is actually framed anyway. So, you just made it easier via blockchain. But it could also be like, because you made it easier, then it's not as fun for people to actually do it. Although, again, like, it's hard to say because we can't just go back in time and redo it, right? I'd say like the quality of games during that time also helped, because I think they were also ahead in terms of like, how they actually position themselves. And if you were to maybe recreate the game with the current landscape that we have, and we have all sorts of games that can compete with them, right? It might not have the same traction as it had like before. But yeah, I mean, Eve, for example, is also one interesting game that kind of is like an economy-based game, right? And the economy is the game. So yeah, I'd love to see like how it would actually fare when it's actually built on blockchain. So yeah.
Good. All right, let's touch upon the second part of the name of what you're building, BreederDAO.
Yep.
So where does the DAO element come in what you're doing? Until now, it seems like you could do it just very centralized as a company, as a business.
Yep. The DAO is pretty interesting because, as you said, right, we're a factory, and factories tend to be more centralized, right? And rightly so, because we don't expect people, especially the holders of the token, to just quit their jobs and just join us full time and run the DAO because they have some skin in the game, right? And I don't think like anyone has actually perfected like how a DAO should look like. But for me, like DAO, at least like how we're starting, would be a hybrid of centralized and decentralized. In a sense, it's like CDAO, right? You have a component that's centralized, but you also have a decentralized component that allows for the organization to participate. So I just watched Stranger Things, which is like Hive Mind is actually very, or resonates with me like really well. I still believe that, many heads, many brains would still be contributing towards like the betterment of DAO versus like, just one or like a pool of individuals, because there are a lot of things that we're not seeing. blockchain is very early. And even though, you have like a specific individual for every specific game, I don't think that that individual would be able to see it all. So for our case, we want to leverage, or we want to ask help from the community to look at like what's out there, right? How the how the gaming landscape, at least on blockchain, would actually change, and how then we can actually further the development and the innovation within the space. Because right now, these games aren't really set in terms of where they're gonna head towards, and so there's a lot of things that can change, and we don't know like how that would change. And people like helping us in terms of seeing that change would actually be a really good help in terms of determining like where we want to go from that vision. But also like we don't even know like who are the people within our community as well. We're actually trying to see like what sorts of individuals we're able to attract. Are these the more gamer type? Are these, more data driven like people? In which case, we want to do a slower rollout of the things that we hand off to the DAO, depending on the skill set and the capabilities of the individuals within the DAO. So yeah, it's a lot, right? And yeah, it's also a question that we've been asking ourselves, right? We set out to be a DAO, but what does that really mean, right? So, I mean, just recently we launched our governance in our discourse. So we want to know how people would react to a thing, to something like a constitution that would basically act as like a guideline to what we believe in and how we operate as a group, and the things that we can or cannot do based on, certain legal implications, right? So yeah, I mean, from there, like, hopefully we'll be able to gauge like the kind of people. You might not know that you have a ton of lawyers within the DAO or token holders, right? And maybe you start off by, giving some legal works to the DAO, or, maybe some analytics to the DAO. So yeah, pretty interesting.
Are you working together with games right now? Because yep. I can imagine that they're either excited by what you're doing or afraid about what you're doing.
Yep.
What's the sentiment?
We actually work closely with the games. So our promise to them is that it's not as though like we'll just flood their market, right? And we wouldn't want that either, because how then could we actually generate profits? So the way we work with games would be more of understanding what it is that they're actually creating and sharing information in terms of what worked and what didn't, right? So from the pool of games that we have and from the pool of games that we've been tracking, what did they do? And then what happened when they actually did what, right? And then aside from that, it's really more of like brainstorming together, because nobody has this proper formula to be able to create that sustainable game, right? So it's really more of bouncing ideas. If you do this, how would this react, right? And then how do we, as like, the provider of assets to guilds, be able to help them, like, share their game to the guilds, especially the micro guilds that we call, who do not have the same visibility as the larger ones, right? So yeah, it's really more of that.
Okay. And so there's a bunch of people who are building games listening to this. If they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I mean, we're everywhere. We're on Twitter. We're on Telegram. So I myself, they can ping me if they want to. I've had a lot of people like reach out to me via LinkedIn or Twitter.
Okay.
And I might not respond immediately, but I'll make sure I actually read and respond like, within 24 to 48 hours.
Wow. Respect. So what we know now is that Renz doesn't sleep a lot. That's safe to conclude here.
I think it's most of us in Web3. That never sleeps, right?
That is very true. Well, Renz, this was super insightful, super interesting. Yep. I really enjoyed our talk. I'm going to keep thinking about what you do and what it means for games, and how we can how that can work synergistically. I think it's an interesting open question.
I think the UGC one will be like really huge, especially for the games.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, Renz, thank you so much for joining. This was a pleasure. So, listener, thank you for listening as well. I hope you found it as interesting and insightful as I did. If you liked it, feel free to give us a good rating, subscribe, and that good stuff. If you want to learn more, you can subscribe to the Naavik newsletter, and we often do deep dives in the games that we discussed today. Maybe at some point in BreederDAO as well. Who knows? And if you want to have access to that, yeah, I'll send it to you. But if you also would like to see some of these industry breakdowns, you can always subscribe to Naavik Pro, and you can use the code Metacast there to get some discounts. So with that, we're out, and we look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. Ciao.